Nguzo Saba, the 7 principles codified by Dr. Malana Karenga. These aren't just a list of key Swahili words that we should familiarize ourselves with during the last week of the year in our Kwanzaa celebrations. No, these principles are deeply rooted in our Kebalan tradition. Nguzo, pillar, or we might be more familiar calling it column, as in those columns we see in those Greco-Roman style temples in the past. But these columns don't have their origin in Greece or Rome. No, their origin is in Kemet, the original word being dejed. Dejed as in a column or a pillar or a structure in order to support the entrance to a temple. Dejed was tied back to one of our original deities, Osiris. He was considered the bringer of justice to the Kemetic people. He gave them their ability to civilize themselves. And so too do the Nguzo Saba. The 7 principles: Umoja, Kujichagulia, Ujima, Ujama, Nia, Kuumba, Imani. They roughly translate out to English as unity, self-determination, collective work and responsibility, cooperative economics, purpose, creativity, and faith.
The duty of the griot in African society is very important because they tell the people who they are, where they came from, and where they're supposed to head to. These are the words of Papa Suso.
Not too long ago, I had the pleasure of watching a couple whose performance was delightfully conscious of their responsibility as griots. I had to introduce them to you.
My great-great-great-grandfather, as the story goes, had a dream. And in the dream, he saw a woman on a bridge, and he asked the woman her name, and she said her name was Arsimmer. And so he woke up, and his wife went into labor, and that is the name of their daughter that they decided. Her name was Arsimmer Bailey. And so her daughter, she decided to name Mary, but that's a whole different story. We don't get it. It's fine. But after Mary had her first child, my mom, and named her Arsimmer, and my mother named me Arsimmer. And I said, all right, Ma, I'll name my baby Arsimmer. And I think it's going to stop there. I just have a feeling Arsimmer Yahali is not going to be with it. I just...
That's what it is.
You know how you just have a feeling like your kid is going to have that conversation with you, like the buck stops here. Her name is going to be Samantha. So, we'll move on with your life. Mary. So now the petty story, being that I got, when I was growing up, you know, everybody wanted to know what my name meant, you know, and I felt like I had to give them something because I knew it was a made up name. I knew it didn't have a real meaning. So I went through life telling people that it was Nigerian. And I told them it was Nigerian for, I think, the dream, which was utter BS.
She also told me that she was Nigerian.
I also told him I was Nigerian. Mm-hmm. See, that's the thing.
I mean, have you disproven that?
See, that's the thing, is there's no real way to say it's not.
I mean,
well, there's a real way.
Shut up.
Wait, you could swab them out. Does she sleep hard? Just get in there.
Oh yeah.
But it's so interesting because I think that's what's the beauty of having parents that instill a sort of consciousness in you, because while other kids, black kids, were trying to be like, you know, oh, I'm mixed with white or I'm mixed with Hispanic, I just wanted to be blacker. So Nigeria to me was exotic and different and something that I knew people would be into, and people were. He was. So he wanted to talk about it.
I was already interested.
Nah.
I was already
He thought I was from the motherland, okay? He wanted some Nigerian babies. He's lying, okay?
So when did you find out it was all a lie? It was all a lie. When did you find out?
Talking with her parents. It was something that her parents said. I can't remember what they said something, and I sat there and I was like, wait a minute.
I remember very young, I decided I was never going to date a musician, and I stuck to that. really well. But I didn't know poets were just as aggravating too. So, I didn't count that. You don't foresee it. You don't see it. But in the beginning, being that I did poetry and he did poetry, and I think we touched on it at the thing, it's like a little bit of a competition. Then I got to hear him speak, and I was like, oh, I don't do this for real. I don't do this for real. I don't really do this.
And she does. She keeps saying that.
Nah, you got it. And I was able to, support and, really get it. One thing about me is like, I support people. Like when I meet talented people or anybody with a drive for something and you tell it to me, like I'm all in. Like I've been had by so many of those, what they call them, pyramid schemes. Oh. My mom is worse than me. She has a whole cabinet full of like diet pills from like the 2000s. It's bad. But we're just those type of people. So yeah.
Herbalife.
Herbalife, all of that.
They know who to come sell it to because she gonna support them.
It's crazy, but when I heard him and how amazing he was, I let my guard down. I let that spirit down, and I wanted to just be all in and support. And so for a majority of the time, I did though find myself pushing myself back to kind of lift him up. And I don't think that was nothing that he did. It was something that I did on my own. And it really affected us because I don't think either one of us was walking in our artistry the way that we should have been. And so when I approached him, I was like, we need to start working together. He admitted to me, I'm kind of a little bit afraid of you and I working together. I don't know what that looks like. And so as we did more, as we go out more, we're noticing that people like us together more than they do our separate projects. And even that bothered us. We're like, what do you mean? Like, I don't need to be with this person all the time. But when people like you guys, and when other people walk up to you and they tell you like, I'm so glad that you guys told that story about your marriage and told that story about like you, like I needed to hear that because me and my girl, we go da-da-da-da-da. And like, we've heard so many stories about authentic love and about authentic relationships.
In other countries.
Like, it's insane. And it's such a need for people to know that like these memes and stuff that you see on Facebook, this unsolicited advice from people on how to be married and what that looks like, it's BS. And more real couples should be doing things together. Even if they don't perform, they should be speaking about it. Because people need to know that, like, especially Black people, that our connectivity is way different than anyone else's. We have a bond, the Black man and the Black woman, to each other that is like, is it Kemet? I don't know the word.
I know what you're trying to say. The word won't come to mind.
It's supernatural.
It just happened.
And it's a bond that like you don't like you have with your husband, but really honestly just Black men and women in general have this relationship, have this connectivity. So we start working together, we start doing more projects together, traveling together, learning together, educating each other has been progression in us as individuals. Coming together made us better individuals.
Saying that it's harder to get bookings when you're not together, kind of like Boys to Men.
Oh no, it's not harder, but like it's definitely a stronger performance.
Yeah.
And a strong and like the reaction.
So the interesting thing is when she first started presenting the idea to me, I couldn't identify why I was against it.
Because he don't be liking me sometimes.
But I'm the type of person that I really try and sit with myself, especially when I have very strong feelings about something. So I did the work, kind of sit with myself and trying to be honest with myself. And I said, you're afraid of her. And I said that I'm afraid that if she gets up on that stage with me, one of two things is going to happen. Either people will no longer like me, or they will only like me with her. And everything to me, like credibility has been like an ongoing struggle, kind of internal thing in my head, like what makes me valid, what makes me worthy of being in this space, why am I here? And the thought of the only reason I'm here is because she's here, that bothered me a lot. And I was like, she's talented as hell. She gets up on that stage, like nobody's gonna care about me by myself anymore. It's gonna be Arsimmer and the Calvinettes. Okay?
That's nice.
There were some dry runs, and the response, not only the response of those dry runs, because I think like early what it was just like she would sing a song and then I would do a poem. They weren't as interwoven,
yes.
But the way that it felt being on the stage with her, I couldn't deny how good it felt. So I started to enjoy it, and I remember one day saying to her, I think we should do more stuff together. It kind of happened very organically. As a matter of fact, by the time I opened the idea to her, as with all things, she wasn't really necessarily for it anymore.
Nope.
She wasn't.
It's definitely therapy. I agree with that 100%. The interesting thing about it being therapy is when you realize that you look at it like it's therapy in the way that, you know, you're sharing this piece and you're sharing this piece of yourself in doing so. After a while, after saying the same piece, whatever that thing is, I've worked it out. Like I can't say, I haven't said a piece 100 times and I'm still working it out. Not for me. But the therapy of it for me is just being on the stage in general. So, and I know that comes from a number of places. One of those places is just my stature. I'm short. When you're short, you're shunned a lot, even in the way that people speak to you. Somebody just made a joke to me yesterday, and that was really funny. Like, you know, when you're short, people try and like boost your self-esteem. Like when they come up to you and shake your hand, they're like, what's going on, big man? What's happening, chief? What's going on, chief? What's going on, big boss? Right? Clearly, I'm not. so I know what you're doing right now. I appreciate it. Yeah. So you feel that, right? So, but when I step up on the stage, I'm larger than life. When I step up on the stage, even just by design, the stage is higher than the audience. And it's like, I'm not so small. I'm big in other ways. I am impactful in other ways. I do have worth or value, like, and I have something to offer, right? So I've said this poem 1,000 times, and whatever demons it brings up for me, I've had the opportunity to work out. But what I'm saying here resonates with someone else. So at a point, it's no longer therapy just for me. It's therapy for the individual listening, right? That becomes the dominant thought. It's always therapy for the person listening, but at some point it becomes the dominant thought in my head that you're not up here for you. You've worked this thing out. Them listening has given you the opportunity to work it out. Now you're doing something for them, right? I have a poem that discusses forgiveness, and that's a huge thing for people, how we hold so much inside. What that meant for me, I've worked out. What it means for every time you do that, it's for a new person. A lot of poets get hung up in needing, I need to write a new piece all the time. I need a new piece. I've done this over and over, and people have heard it. If people have heard your poem over and over and over again, that means that you're not spreading yourself out. Because I'm always doing an old poem in front of a new audience. So it's old to me, but it's new to the person hearing it. It's new for the first time. It's therapy for them.
Prior to my husband, the reason why I married him was because he never called me crazy for the way that I felt about certain things.
I thought it.
He thought it, but he never said it.
He never called you crazy. He might think whatever. I'm not bringing nothing up right now. I'm just here to call you, and that's good. That's why we want to keep it.
Like that, I appreciated that though. But I remember like just being with people in certain situations and be like, man, you're crazy. Like, why do you think like this? Why do you move like this? And the stage was the only place where I wasn't crazy. Where I started my background in theater. I was acting probably around the age of 5 or 6. I continued on with it until I got older. I did community theater as well. And just being the fact that I could go to the theater, the fact that I could perform on a stage and be another person, be multiple people if I chose to, and not be called crazy, and have it looked at as beautiful and art and my emotions and all the things that I felt about things, I could pour it into the performance. It became like my church.
Alkebulan, Africa, has a long cultural history of Gilis, also known as griots. These individuals serve their people through storytelling. Today, the contributions of Gilis in Alkebulan and throughout the diaspora are received in various forms, by way of motion picture, novels, poetry, lyrics, plays, musical composition, comedy, visual arts, and other means of creative human expression. These forms of Alkebulan authorship help us as a people to remember and understand ourselves so that we may live authentically.
I learned the term griot in middle school. My middle school drama teacher was quite Afrocentric, which was very off-putting at that time for given the school that we were in. He made a lot of people very uncomfortable, but he was the first person I ever heard use the word griot. And it was something I identified with immediately, something that felt very familiar, even though I had never heard it. Because knowing that, when you grow up, I'm from here in Miami. I grew up in the projects, between Scott Projects and Liberty City and Little Haiti. And there were always griots everywhere I went. I just never had something to call them. But these people who kept the stories of the people who couldn't wait to sit down and tell you about their childhood and what was on that corner, that you don't even know what was on that corner. That building that's been dilapidated ever since you were growing up, that used to be something where he went and played after school, They were always telling us the stories, and so I always resonated with what that was.
I learned the term, I think I was a little bit younger. My father would have me read a lot, and so he instilled, certain terminology, certain words. Yeah, griots were all in my family. My Uncle Alex is probably the biggest griot that we had. He passed away last year, but you're talking about a man who could not only tell a story, but interactively tell a story. You're there. You're in it. You're right next to him during Vietnam, having a drink at the bar, and then the dude walked in and slapped you in the face. Like, you were there. Like, his stories were amazing. And so I realized the power of it when we had our child, because I knew that I had to pass down that history, and it became so important because I didn't want it to be lost on me. I realized that so many generations before don't know anything, not even pop culture, not even like things that everybody should know. He's come home from working at the high school, and some kid doesn't even know who Martin Luther King is or Malcolm X. And these are names that are drilled into us. I expect you not to maybe know about Angela Davis. I expect that. But to not know who Martin Luther King is. So I knew that we had a responsibility, not only for global history, not only for our personal history, but just to keep that going and instill it in our child. So that role, we don't take it lightly at all. We are pretty much the gatekeepers when this world falls to dust. I think that Black people are going to be the ones who will have to rebuild it again. Kind of like that movie with Denzel Washington.
Kind of like life. We built it the first time.
Yeah. But I'm doing a reference. The movie with Denzel Washington, when he told the whole entire Bible to the guy, right?
Oh, the Book of Eli.
The Book of Eli.
Yeah.
That's going to be Black people. Nobody else was going to be able to give the story.
And blind.
When did it hit you that he was blind?
That's a good point. I'm trying to remember now.
I kind of peeped it because he was always looking at the ground fighting people. And I couldn't understand why he wouldn't look up.
That's capoeira.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Because usually, when I'm around blind people, kind of smell older to me than regular people. So I kind of know that they're blind.
I love her face right now. Like, she didn't know where you were going with that. Oh.
They wear all the colognes and stuff like that. They wear
like Brute,
old stuff like that. I'd be like, okay, maybe he
like Jupe.
Yeah, they're inside. They got on the shades. They smell old school. Maybe they're blind. So, but I couldn't smell
sandalwood. Smell like frankincense and myrrh.
You're done. That's enough. Like, how many set references is he gonna make?
It's old stuff, and
I'm
this is
trying
what
to
I'm
reel it in.
how I know. Wait, look, next time you're in a room with a blind person, you know, I'm serious. It could be an indication.
The responsibility of providing the cultural image that can advance us as a people rests squarely upon those that influence our minds, the Jilis. Unfortunately, too many of our Jilis lack direction on how to lead us as a people. They don't know the way. They lack knowledge of our rich heritage that can connect us to our essence. We're in dire need of Jilis who understand their purpose among us, dynamic educators who entertain.
In this city, there are so many people of the African diaspora that don't necessarily identify with it, that don't see themselves as African, and they will do everything in their power to remove themselves from that. In this country, we know that African and Black are consistent, and a lot of people, because they don't resonate with being Black, or they don't want to identify with being Black, they then also don't want to resonate with being African. The thing that everybody I've learned, friends, individuals that I've just met, before they come to this country, they're told something about African Americans. And when they get to this country, they want to do everything that they can do to disassociate themselves from being African American. In this country, for them, the word Black is African American. So you're creating a separation. We're not saying that those are other African people. We're saying that they're Black people. They're different than us. They're whatever negative thing that you've been told. In other countries, we know that we have colorism. And then people bring their colorism here. Again, they're disassociating with that. And so what happens is a lot of people get to this country and they are given whiteness. They are given the privilege and the benefits of whiteness. In Miami, for example, many of our Latin people of the Latin diaspora, benefit from whiteness and white privilege. No, but it's not just them, right? It's many Cuban people, many South American people, many Puerto Rican people, right? If they fall along the category of whiteness, they will identify with whiteness for their benefit. So that separation. So if I believe that you are white and I am Black and I have whiteness and I want to benefit from that, I start treating you like I have white privilege. I start putting you down the same way that white people do. I'm not connected to you and saying, oh, that's my brother, that's my sister. I want to pull them up too. I want to connect with them. I want to learn more. So I definitely feel like that's something that we can tackle with simply knowing our history, because that's a big part of it. A lot of people just do not know. You know, as far as they're concerned, there is no connection. I mean, my skin is a little dark, but I mean, that's just because, I don't know, it's because I like the beach. You know what I mean? Like they don't draw these connections or seek insight. You know, where does that come from? How are we connected? When we went to Ghana last year, everywhere that I looked, every person that I saw was reflective of Haitian people to me. And I grew up here in Miami. I have tons of Haitian friends, and everybody I saw was like, wow, these look like Haitian people. Their facial features, their accent, yes, everything reminded me so much of Haitian people. And I'm like, these links, you know what I mean? You think about, the transatlantic slave trade and where people came from. And again, just how we could, understanding our past, our history, our trajectory, how we are all connected, I think that would greatly, greatly unify people if we understood how we were connected, if we understood that a lot better.
I know this is going to sound very militant, but I also believe strongly that we are always trying to be inclusive, though, in our collectives, in our places, our safe spaces. We're always trying to be inclusive. It feels like our diaspora is always seeking to be accepted. I believe that need, that want, is also what's messing up our identity, is also messing up our progress. Imagine if we decided to say to that person who decided, I don't identify with Black, to be like, okay, well, have a blessed day. We're over here building. And you do you. Like, we want so badly to convince people. We need to continue to convince people that, like, hey, this is beautiful. We are beautiful. We have to build. I just feel like it's being exhausted. And so it's time now for us to just collectively say to those who want to build, to those who know, and to those who understand how to move, let's go ahead and let's work. Let's stop trying to like convince and include, because it doesn't benefit us. It hasn't benefited us for years. I know that's a little bad because we're always referring to, you know, like black and brown people. You know, that's the thing now, you know, it's black and brown. And especially here in Miami, you walk up to a brown person, they're not brown. They're like, oh, well, I didn't know I was brown. I'm white under my pants. What? What are you talking? What are you saying? Like, I don't mean literally you brown, bruh. Like, anyways, but to those people, if you can't make that connectivity, if you can't understand where I'm coming from, you're hindering my process to elevate. And so I can't waste time. I don't think we can waste any more time convincing people of who they are. You know, it's either you get it or you don't. The word, the NIGGER word, you know, that's always coming up. Who can use it? Who can't use it? Why can we use it? Why we can't use it? And everybody's got their opinions on it. But it's like, is this really what we're going to sit and talk about while we're being shot in our own homes? This is what y'all want to talk about? This is what you want to give your energy to? Like, we're not doing that anymore. You don't know whether or not you can use it. You don't know whether or not you're okay to use it. You pray about it. We need to move on, and we need to make sure that not another, you know, black man is killed in his own home because somebody thought it was their house. Like, come on. We don't have time for that.
Kuumba, creativity, is the act of striving after our higher selves. As our nation's creatives, Gilis have a chart. They must work and manipulate the essential materials that are needed for our people to realize our higher selves, our hearts and our minds. Gilis must always do as much as they can in the way that we can understand in order to leave us informed, inspired, elevated. Essentially, better off than they found us.
The one called Code of Ethics, I remember one night specifically I performed it. It was very like new. It wasn't really worked out. It definitely wasn't what it is now, but the opening to the piece was the same as it is now. And shortly after, like later on that night, a poet who was there, he's not from here, from Miami, but he was in the building that night. He went on Facebook and put up a status. And I said something about if your audience can't understand your work, or if you're trying to use, you know, certain large words or something like that, and your audience can't understand your work, what's the point? And I knew he was talking about me. I'd just given everything that had gone on that night. It was just after the event. I know I would listen to every poem.
Who did that?
And so it really gave me a weird feeling about the piece, but I'm not going to look at her. It gave me a weird feeling about she is a lioness. So
I don't like that type of stuff.
It gave me a weird feeling about the piece for a while, because I was really like, you know, am I doing too much? Am I making it too wordy? And I said, you know, there is some level of definitely in poetry where people are just trying to sound intelligent. This wasn't that. And what I landed on with the piece was, hopefully it makes people want to go look something up. Hopefully you hear the word and it sticks in your head and you Google it. If you take the time to Google the word that you don't know as I'm doing the piece and you miss the whole rest of the piece, that's fine, because I still taught you a new word. Like, you still got something out of it. That may be what you were there for. With that, like, I accepted it. The piece that Arsimmer is talking about is called the fire drill. The metaphor is that, you know, I'm in school, because I work in schools. I'm telling the kids, there's going to be a fire. Your entire life is a fire drill. The fire will come, but when it does, don't be looking for somebody to save you. It's necessary for you to understand the need to save yourself. And every single day you are facing a potential fire. What you do, or how you're understanding to save yourself, it greatly affects your entire life. But so often we do things that hinder our children. And I think the people who don't get it is the adults, not the children. I think that when the adults hear it, they don't hear how they are complicit in what I'm saying. So, for example, there's a line where we say, but maybe it's our fault. We pick up their toys and teach them to play with their responsibilities. We held their hand, traced their name, and now they don't know who they are. So saying, and it's very common things that parents do, even for us. My daughter brings home homework, and sometimes it's extreme. When she was younger, definitely, it was very difficult not to just do it for her. Like, it would get annoying to the point where I just like, oh, God, and that's what parents do. And you're teaching them, I'm always going to step in. I'm always going to save you. I'm always going to be here, until one day they're in a situation where you're not. And I grew up in a household where my mother would say, you realize someday I'm going to die. She still says it.
To this day.
She always says, I hate it. But her point was, you need to know how to do things. And when I'm doing this piece, I do think that oftentimes the audience hears me talking to the children, the kids, and they're like, yeah, you kids need to, well, whose responsibility is it to make sure that they know that? Whose responsibility is that? So you're missing how you're complicit. That is like completely going past you.
I mean, sometimes when I say ribbon in the sky, it definitely goes over people's heads. So they like, what ribbon? What does that mean? Ribbon for what? Like,
what she's not telling you, though, is that she writes short stories. And some of her short stories, or all of her short stories, always have a much deeper meaning than people can probably see. Or there's something at the surface level that you're not willing to dissect a little bit further. Or, again, to be introspective. How is this actually about me? What part of that do I see in myself?
You can find me at my name, spelled my name, no blessed or too blessed or, ratchet, Arsimmer. No, it's just Arsimmer, McCoy early on Facebook and on social media. My social media is really dedicated to both my arts and my personal life. There was a point where I thought that I needed it to be separate. But I think a lot of times people don't get to see those other sides and those other aspects. They want to kind of like box you into a position, and we box ourselves by separating everything. So it's like, hey, you can see my artistry, but you can also see how I love on my child and how, the community is important to me and all these different things at the same time. So you can see all of that on both my Facebook and my Instagram at my name.
And my Instagram handle is at Calvin Early Speaks. That's CalvinEarlyspeaks. That's my personal page. I would say I don't do very, very much on there or post as often. I think I'm more like what you were saying. I don't post very often. I'm not as active as I can be. I very much post when it's necessary. But I post a lot more on our on the page that we use for the work that we do, which is the Spoken Word Exchange. So at the Spoken Word Exchange on Instagram, and everything related to the project goes there. All of our trips, any workshops, anything that we do goes on that page.